this guy, we called him, earlier today and said, can you present? And he was like, yes. So thanks again so much. He's doing some really cool deals as well, so I would really recommend talking to him, getting to know what he's doing with some of his syndications as well. All right, up next we are doing our panel. So tonight we've got some representatives from various New Hampshire housing agencies. I have the great pleasure of getting to introduce them. So from New Hampshire Housing and Finance Authority, the Director of Housing Services, Miss Lynn Lippin.
Ooh.
From Manchester Housing, we have the Leased Housing Coordinator, Miss Bonnie Badalati. And also from Manchester Housing, we have the Leased Housing Program Coordinator, Miss Nicole Hudson. And our moderator for tonight's panel is Mr. Matt Lefebvre. So if you could all come forward, the representatives from the housing agencies can sit here at this table, and Matt will come on up. And the forum for this panel, Matt will be asking some questions of the panel. They'll have a back and forth. Some of them have some material to present as well about the various programs that are available. And then it is going to open up to questions to the audience. So if you think of any questions while we're being presented with this information, please write them down and we will take them at the end.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you stepping in. Thanks for giving my voice a break there. I got some water, had a snack, took a quick jog around the hotel. So, all right. So let's get back into this again. Thank you, Ryan, and ladies. Thank you all for being here tonight. We appreciate you coming out and sharing with us a little bit more, sort of about what your agencies do and what you offer. One of the reasons that we wanted to have folks from housing organizations come here this evening is I personally know that there's a lot of misinformation about housing assistance and how those programs work. Just in the, 3 minutes that Nicole and I were talking before the meeting started, she told me about a different housing program that I had zero idea existed. So take everything you can away from this meeting tonight, open your mind up, ask questions, learn. These people are here as a resource, and they're here as a resource for your tenants who pay your mortgage. So they help. There is a lot of opportunities with these folks here. So certainly ask the questions, learn about the programs, and we'll get into it. So I guess I will have you folks introduce yourself. So Nicole, did you want to go ahead and start off? Tell us a little bit about who you are, and we'll kind of go down the list from there.
Sure. So my name is Nicole Hudson, and I have been working with Manchester Housing Redevelopment Authority since July of last year. Prior to that, I worked in sheltering, so I've kind of worked on both sides of the coin of housing. My main role with Manchester Housing is to be a liaison. So I tie everything together between tenants, landlords, and the housing authority. I resolve tenants, landlord issues. I find available units. I do a lot of the hunting. A lot of you got emails from me. I'm a hound for that. I apologize for the abundance of emails, but we have a lot of people we're trying to house. And so we're just here to answer some questions about how the program works and how we can help you help your tenants.
Thank you, Nicole.
Good evening. My name is Bonnie Badalati. I am the Leased Housing Director for Manchester Housing and Redevelopment Authority. I have been there for 39 years, and I've done everything from the receptionist to intaking for new clients coming on the program, from the waiting list to recertifications, and now my current position is overseeing the department. I love it. I'm still staying there for another year or two, so thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And last but not least.
Hi, I'm Lynn Lippin. I'm the Director of Housing Services for New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, New Hampshire Housing for short. And I've been there 33 years, so a long time in the same position, but done a lot of different things. So primarily know a lot about different types of services to keep people housed. So whether it's for seniors or families, and right now managing the emergency rental assistance program. So that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you all for being here and for introducing yourselves. So to get started, I kind of just want to talk about the basics of rental assistance and how that works here in New Hampshire. So can you just give me like the brief overview of how a housing voucher works. Like what, if I'm a landlord and somebody comes to me with a housing voucher, what do I do? How do I handle that? How does that process work? Like, just give me the basics. We'll start there.
Okay, so if someone comes to you and they have a voucher, that means that they have been approved to receive assistance through our agency. They are then out looking for units that are affordable to them. They are told pretty much how they can rent a unit, what they need to look for. We have information on what to look for in a unit, what will make a unit pass inspection, what would require some work to be done. They will look for a landlord to rent to them. We do no screening other than for the program guidelines, so we do a criminal background check. We're only looking for drug-related activities, violent criminal activities, so we do no screening other than that, and then of course income. If they come to you and you're interested in the person, we always say that you should do your own screening because they are your tenant, they need to abide by your lease. If you think that this person is somebody that you want to rent to, then they will come with paperwork for an inspection. Basic information, where's the apartment located, how many bedrooms, what's the rent, security deposit, what are the utilities and who pays for them. You will sign off on that, the tenant signs off on it, returns it to us. From there, we do an inspection to determine what rent we can pay and make sure that it meets the housing quality standards. If everything works well, you sign a lease with the tenant, we sign a contract with you, and payments start rolling your way.
Awesome. And where do those payments come from?
From HUD.
From HUD?
Yep, they come directly from HUD. We send out checks directly to the owner, and then the family's responsible to pay their portion of rent directly to the owner as well.
Gotcha. And so how does that tenant housing portion thing work out? What do I expect with that? Like, okay, so say for example, I have a tenant and you guys send me a check on the 2nd day of February, I get the check for your portion. What happens if the tenant doesn't pay theirs? How do I deal with that?
Just the same way you would if you didn't have the subsidy. You would give them a notice if they didn't pay their rent. If they continue not to pay their rent, then they would end up getting an eviction notice, I believe. But at our department, Nicole is actually, as she said, the liaison. So she would be working with the family, trying to get them to apply for what Southern New Hampshire Services and New Hampshire Housing Finance is involved with, the assistance program where families can get help with rent. So we would try to get them engaged with that assistance so that they don't have to get evicted. Or maybe we can talk to the landlord and family to find out what's going on if there's a problem other than rental payment, that we can maybe work something out so that they don't end up in the eviction system.
Gotcha. Okay. Nicole, I know that you had a couple of slides that you wanted to share. Were we getting too much into your topic yet, or did you kind of want to start with that, or?
Oh, no, we covered, the slides cover pretty much everything, so we can go through them, or we can do question and answer. It's pretty flexible.
Yeah, why don't we get started with you firing up a presentation, and we can run through a couple slides there. If there's any questions, we'll go through those as they come. So, yeah, why don't we start with that then?
That's yours. Yep, I'll switch out of it.
And Nicole, before the meeting, we had talked about there's a bunch of these individual pieces of paper from Manchester Housing Finance Authority. We have, 5, 6 different documents here. So did you talk with Diane about getting those out the door? Or?
I have them here. We can hand them out if anybody's interested in them. I'll go through them as well.
Okay, so for anybody that is interested, we do have some handouts that go along with this after the fact. You can collect them at the front afterwards, or you can put your name, number, and email down, and Nicole will reach out to you and send you a copy of the forms that we have here, which is kind of like a summary of what we're talking about today. And we're live.
All right. So, again, I'm from Manchester Housing. So, in providing housing vouchers, we service about 2,000 households to the city of Manchester and a 6-mile radius outside the city limits. We do parts of Londonderry, Auburn, Hooksett, Allenstown, Goffstown, Bedford, Merrimack, Pembroke, and Litchfield. We do have a radius diagram. I do not have that. I apologize for that. Next slide. So as Bonnie was mentioning earlier, the process on what happens when a voucher holder or participant comes to you and says, I want to rent a unit from you. So we've done a little bit of a flow chart for this to kind of help out, and it helps out not only our tenants, but our landlords to understand where we are in the process. I like to call it my Domino's pizza tracker. So right now, you have a voucher that comes to you, and they're saying they want to look at a unit. So you would do your normal application process. I would hope that you have an application that you guys all formally fill out. You do whatever background checks, screening checks with your tenant, because again, we do not screen for suitability. That is something that you screen for. So when you come back and you call me and say this tenant is a nuisance and they're a problem, I'm going to remind you that you did screen them and that we do not screen them for suitability. And they're your tenants, we subsidize them. From there, the family would give you what's called an RFTA, or Request for Tenancy Approval. This packet is a 4-page packet, and it has a cover letter on the front with a Request for Tenancy form where the owner fills out the information. On the back side, there is a block that the tenant, prospective tenant, must fill out. If you send that back to us and it's not filled out completely, we are not going to know where the inspection needs to be done or who the tenant is for. It is very important that you have them fill this out before it comes back to us. We're also going to include a W-9 and a direct deposit form. Please make sure you have those filled out correctly onto your business name or whatever name you want to be paid in, because that is how you will be paid. From there, the landlord would send in the W-9 back to the housing authority, to the leased housing specialist or intake specialist that is assigned to that family. I do have a list of breakdowns on who gets what per last name and intake specialist information, so you can contact them. Once that is sent back to us, NHREIA calculates an affordability to ensure the unit is affordable for the family. Not all units are affordable for each family. We do subsidize, but every family's income is a little bit different. So what works for one family may not work for another, but we subsidize the same across the board. If the affordability is not working for that family, it stops. And they look for another unit or renegotiate with landlords. Sometimes we have families that look at units and they come within $30 of their limit, and then I'll call you and say, hey, can we drop this $30? Can we negotiate something? Can we make it so this family can have this? 9 out of 10 times, I have a landlord that is willing to work with us and negotiate the rent on it to make sure that it fits the family's max allotment, which is fantastic. I'm so thankful for it, because there are so many families out there right now looking for homes. Once that is done, MHRA will then have an inspector schedule with the landlord to inspect your unit. There's a whole list here that I have of housing quality inspection standards lists, so you know what you need to have done in your unit, or what your unit needs to look like to be prepared for an inspection. After the inspector conducts their inspection to make sure the unit passes, we also do a process that's called rent reasonableness. We do this process to make sure that the rents charged to the unit are matching the amenities that come along with the unit and its relative in value. And if there's any necessary repairs that need to be made, so the unit will pass inspection, we address it at that time. When the unit passes the inspection and the rent reasonableness is established, the landlord and the voucher will execute their lease with each other. In that Rft packet that we mentioned, we also request a proposed copy of the lease, not a signed copy of the lease. The lease cannot be dated and cannot be processed until the inspection is passed on the unit. We remind our tenants that if they're going to move into a unit but prior to an inspection passing, they are responsible for any fees, rent, or anything incurred before then, because we are not allowed to subsidize until the inspection is passed. Once that lease is all executed and set, we then execute our housing assistance payment contract. That is your contract with the housing authority. That is your agreement and how you get paid. And then we send out payments. Any questions?
It's a good start to finish process there. Just as a quick aside, because I'm reading this, the move-in checklist here for like common list of repairs and whatnot. Pretty much everything on this list is just normal. There must not be any plumbing leaks. The roof must not be leaking. Hot and cold running water in the kitchen and bathrooms. Like, most of this seems pretty straightforward. So what are the things that landlords don't think about that housing typically checks for? I think that would probably be valuable for most folks here.
One of my biggest things is, does your windows open, close, lock, and stay in place? Are your fire alarms working? Are there exposed wires? Do all of your plugs work? If they don't, do they have a switch plate over them that covers them?
Mhm.
Do you have your utilities on? There are so many units. I go out with the inspectors every once in a while, and I've gone to units where they don't have the utilities on, and then we can't inspect them, and we have to go back out, and it is a process.
Mhm.
I would have to say that it takes us to do an initial inspection anywhere between a half an hour and 45 minutes, if not an hour.
Mhm.
We have one inspector that's doing initial inspections right now that is working with another inspector we're training, so it is very hard to do that in a 7-hour day. So the more you guys have your units prepared and ready for us, the faster we can get in and out of there, inspect your unit, and the more people we can house. So it's really important to have all these little things done because they make the big picture.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because like you said, the window thing, that's a great example of it too. I mean, how many 1900s, rope and pulley windows do we see in New Hampshire right now that don't open properly, or they get propped open with the the wooden bar or whatever? So yeah, that's a good point of advice there. Yeah, so on this process here, I guess let's maybe take a few minutes and ask the group some questions. Are there any questions about this process, kind of start to finish, for how somebody who's interested in applying for an apartment that has a housing voucher gets approved, gets into the unit, you guys start getting paid rent? Questions? Comments? Concerns? Yes.
Is this what we call Section 8?
Perfect.
Great question. Nicole, do you want to explain, or any of you three want to explain Section 8, HUD, housing, what do these things mean?
So Section 8 is the commonly known name, but we call it the Housing Choice Voucher Program. One of the reasons why we like the Housing Choice Voucher Program is it reminds everybody that the tenant gets the choice on where they are moving into, and the landlord gets to make the choice too. This is not something that we are handpicking somebody and putting them in your unit for you. So everybody has a choice in this, and Section 8 tends to come with a stigma of people with certain backgrounds, and that's not the case. Our program services people from all walks of life, all backgrounds and everything. So it's not that we don't call it Section 8, we just try to stray away from that stigma and that name for it, and we really want to emphasize the choice in the process.
Okay. I saw a question over here, Brad.
Yeah. So I'm curious on how it works for, like, as a rentor and how they walk through that, because I mean, the biggest thing in my eyes is, where are you guys getting the money to pay me as a landlord? You know what I mean? Like, where is that money coming from?
I'll go ahead. So we get money from HUD. So what happens is, when people get put onto the program, we have to enter this data into a database. So everybody in the household, all of their pertinent information, all of their income, all of their assets, and it calculates out what their rent should be. So we get money based on all the people on the program, the HAP, and then any administrative fees. And then from there, that money gets filtered to us from HUD, Washington, and then they send it to all the housing authorities, and then we, in turn, pay you based on, the cost for each family that gets leased up.
Gotcha.
Ryan, I saw you had a question over there. Oh, Lynn, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do. New Hampshire Housing runs a housing choice voucher program throughout the state as well, so if you have properties outside of Manchester. But one of the things I think is important for investors is that it's a wait list to get on the assistance. So when you purchase a property and there's tenants there, they're not going to be able to apply and get assistance right away. So it's a long time to get that. But we have people looking all the time. So if you have vacant units, contact any of us, and we have people who can fill those units.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up? You're good? Awesome. So, Nicole, did you want to keep moving along in the presentation, or fire off some next questions? All right.
Fantastic. All right, so we've covered a little bit of on the how do I know the applicant can afford this unit. They are equipped before they start searching with their max allotments and what they can afford, and they know how to look for a unit. One of the biggest questions I have when a landlord calls is, well, what is their voucher worth, and what is the payment standard, what is this? So we did include in our packets what's called the payment standard of fair market rents and what we pay, what Manchester Housing pays for a unit. This is for our housing authority. I can't answer that for Lynn's, but, so they know what they can afford. They know what they can afford for a unit, and they know that if the unit is outside of it, they shouldn't be applying for it. It's something that we really coach them and teach them on how to understand it. We do use a utility allowance schedule and combined with their rent amount to make sure that it comes in at or below their max allotment, and then we go from there. If the rent is over their program guidelines, we generally try to reach out and have a conversation with them about, the affordability and where it meets, because we are only allowed to have our program participants pay 30 to 40% of their income towards their units. So there are guidelines to their max of what they can afford.
Did you have copies of this fair market rent sheet, Nicole? You said you had a few of those?
I do, yes, I have them up here if anybody would like a copy of them.
Ryan, would you mind passing out one of those per table, just so everybody can see specifically the fair market rent sheet? I just think that's a useful visual since we're talking about it. And that's eventually going to lead into some follow-up questions I have about it too. But, continue on the presentation.
If you have questions, we're moving into leases and contracts.
Oh, okie dokie. I saw a question right there. Yes, sir.
If there's a unit that has utilities included, how do you handle that? Different numbers?
So generally when we have a participant looking, they have a number that they can go over if the unit includes utilities. So how do I explain this to make you understand? It's a lot of math.
So, if an apartment has utilities included, then the family can pay, as Nicole said, 30 to 40% of their income. If the utilities are not included, we have to look at what type of utility. So if the heat, is it oil, is it gas, electric, propane? And then we have a chart. So for any rent that does not include utilities, we take the asking rent from the landlord and we add in the utilities. When we get that dollar, we look and see, is it affordable to the family? We also, on the other side, take the tenants 30 to 40% of their income and deduct the utilities because they need money to pay their heat, their hot water, their cooking and lights. So we reduce the tenant's portion to pay the utilities, but the rent plus all of the utilities is what we're looking for to see if the apartment is affordable.
Sounds good. All right. Question back there?
Typically, say you have a tenant now and you want them to apply, how long would they be pretty much on the wait list for, roughly? 6 months, a year?
It all depends. So we have preferences in Manchester. If you're a fire victim, you're at the top of the waiting list. If you are a veteran, you're going ahead of some people. So we have programs specifically designated for disabled people or for people leaving the foster care system. So we have specific programs, but the normal wait, if anyone, any family, any elderly disabled apply right now for the Manchester Housing Authority, the wait's about 3 years.
For New Hampshire Housing, it's 7 to 9 years, if you don't have a preference.
79 years?
7 to 9
Oh.
years, sorry. No, 7 to
7 to 9 years.
It's still just
It's
about
not
as
that
long,
bad.
but
And we do have preferences, similar in special programs, but I just encourage people to apply right away.
What are the different programs called? Like, are there different names for kids who are coming out of foster care or vets
Yeah.
or what are the names?
So the main program is the Housing Choice Voucher Program.
Housing
Section
Choice.
8 Housing Choice Voucher. It started off as Section 8, we went to Housing Choice Voucher Program, but then there's subcategories. So for Manchester Housing, we have VASH vouchers, Veterans Assisted Vouchers, which is a collaboration between Manchester Housing and the
hey guys, can I ask you not to talk during the presentation? Thank you.
and the VA, so they get their case management through the VA, and then they get the subsidy through Manchester Housing. We have non-elderly disabled vouchers, so the head of household has to be under 62 years old and disabled. We have vouchers for home ownership, people who want to purchase a home with a voucher. We have that program. We have, as you said, the FYI, the foster youth independence program. So we have anybody leaving foster care between the ages of 16 and 23. They can get a voucher. So people can apply on just the regular waiting list, but then, as I said, if they fit
They fit
any of
into
those
one of those
subcategories,
subcategories.
they can be put on that list too with a referral. Most of those are referrals, so you would get a referral from the VA, or maybe from the mental health center, or from any agency with a case management, and then we would process them for both. We put them, everybody goes on the regular waiting list, and then if they qualify for a subcategory, they go on that waiting list.
Right.
And those are available. Yes?
Thank you.
Yes, okay.
And like I asked in the beginning to Nicole, I said there's programs that you're telling me about that I've never even heard of. So I think one of the, I think the long short is if somebody is interested in applying for an apartment, you think that they're gonna be a good applicant, and they think they need some kind of assistance one way or another, send them to housing, send them to any housing agency, and they're gonna figure it out and put them in the right program. Is that what I'm gathering?
Right.
Okay.
Is the wait list as long as, like, does it take as long as it does because of the fact that there's a smaller amount of units available? So if you had a tenant living there already that needed assistance, would they be able to get on quicker?
No.
Okay.
So what happens is people apply on the waiting list, it goes by date of application and preference. So if you apply for assistance, when we get to your name, we have to go to all the people that applied before you,
Right.
before the date you applied, and in that preference group. So we have to go for them, regardless if you're in an apartment or not. We can't jump over people because we know you're in an apartment. We have to go through everybody first. So we might give a voucher out to somebody, they're out looking, they can't find anything. We can't just say, okay, let's go to the next person. That term has to go all the way through, and then we can say, okay, it didn't work out, let's call more people in.
Okay.
So that's how,
Thank you.
that's why the wait is so long, but we actually, due to COVID, we were giving out a lot of vouchers, trying to get, people assistance, and unfortunately, because there were no apartments, they got a voucher, and they looked, and they couldn't find anything, and after the time period was up, they lost their voucher. So waiting for 6 years, prior to 2020, waiting for 6 years, got a voucher, looked around everywhere they could find, no available apartment. Sorry, they have to now reapply. So that was difficult for us to, take their voucher away, but unfortunately, there's certain guidelines that we had to follow at that time.
Right.
And
How long did you give them to find an apartment after
So,
you hand them the voucher?
in the beginning, you get, right up front, you get 60 days, and then you can show us that you're looking. We can give you an additional 60 days, and if somebody's disabled or, needs a reasonable accommodation, so for a medical purpose, they need more time. They were hospitalized during their search. They have a health problem that prevented them from finding a unit. So that could also give them another 60 days. But HUD put out some new waivers, and they've allowed us to give multiple extensions, which we're gonna do because we feel that it's more important to get the people who have the voucher right now an opportunity to lease up than to say, okay, sorry, next. It would be beneficial to those people, we've already processed them, than to start all over again, bring in a new family, re-verify everything, and start the process over. And you don't know if that family's gonna find anything, so it's always we have over 134 families right now with a voucher looking for a place to live that could lease up any moment if they found a place, if they could afford a place. So it's not like we don't have anybody out looking. There are people looking right now. We just need them to find that suitable place and make sure that it's affordable.
Tony, I saw your hand over there. I don't want to get too far into this one subject. Quick question or longer question? All right, well, let's save that to the end. Write it down, we'll save it to the end. So let's keep moving along with the presentation here, because I think we probably have a few more slides to get through.
Thank you. So this one's just a little bit about leases and contracts, because again, we get a lot of the questions from landlords and tenants, and they come to us and they say, your tenant, and I say, your tenant. So we do not do leases. This is something, again, we leave up to you guys to draw up, and I highly recommend that you consult a lawyer or somebody of legal advice, because we don't give legal advice either. Your lease is your standard contract. All leases must have the required tenancy addendum attached to them to satisfy HUD requirements. This is something that's also given to you given to the tenant in their briefing packet. A minimum lease must include a term must include the terms of the lease, the address, security deposit, rent amount, late charges, name authorized occupants. We get that a lot. Make sure that your lease has who's supposed to be in the unit on there. Indicate who owns the appliances. I've had several calls, complaints. There's something wrong. They took my appliances. They did this. They did that. Please make sure you include that. Who pays the utilities and renewal options? The full amount of the rent must be listed on the lease, and just make sure that, you know, you ask yourself, does this cover all of the issues that you want, and are you prepared to stand by your lease terms? Housing assistance payment contract. This is the contract that is between us and the landlord. This describes the terms and requirements of the landlord's working with the voucher program. It's all pretty self-explanatory. It is something that read. Make sure that you read it when you do receive one. Don't just sign one. And it includes a section on participant responsibilities, so make sure that you're paying attention to that as well. Some little things about good leasing practices is you can and you should charge a security deposit. We do not cover security deposits. There is funding available out there for that through different agencies. The deposit should be equal to but not exceed more than 1 month of rent or what is per state law currently. You may charge a little application fee to cover the cost of doing a background check, and landlords are responsible for obtaining security deposits from their tenants personally. We do not obtain them for you. Again, you know, going over how a program participant gets onto a program, we do not screen the families for eligibility or for suitability. We screen for eligibility to our program. And it is the landlord's responsibility to make sure that they monitor those screening processes. So this is just a kind of a quick view. We talked about that Rft Packet. This is the part where I said there's a little spot on the back of it. Make sure that your tenant fills this out properly. This information describes the unit, utilities, rents. Is important to make sure it's completed and signed on both sides, and then you return it to your intake specialist. This is how we schedule our inspections. So the housing quality standards and how you can prepare for them. This is another handout that I have. This is the checklist of stuff that you prepare for real quick. It just says that the units have to pass the inspection before we can enter into a contract and rental agreement with you. The inspection certifies that the condition of the unit at the time is the inspection. We do not pre-inspect units that are not intended to be leased up to voucher holders. The initial inspection, the unit must be vacant or occupied by the voucher holder. Sometimes we have families that are currently in place and their landlord has decided to accept Section 8, and that's when we'll come in and we'll inspect the unit when it's occupied. Once rented, the regular inspections and good preventative maintenance routines are essential to help making sure that you pass your housing quality inspections, which are biannually. I do deeply encourage that our tenants reach out to their landlords first in communication when there's an issue with the unit instead of running back to us immediately, and to maintain good contact with their landlords. We try to make sure that they have a running stream of communication and an open, transparent relationship. So when issues do arise, and then we do come in and do an inspection, it's not a surprise. So the checklist is here, and if anybody who did not receive one, you can get one. I'll send one to you via email. This next section is just a little bit about reasonableness, and this just kind of describes the whole process after we inspected a unit to make sure the unit meets the rent reasonableness and the amenities match type of thing. So landlords are not permitted to charge a program applicant more than a unit that they would charge for any other tenant. The only difference between one tenant and the next is one could be subsidized and one's not. They're all on the same path. Proposed rent for a unit must be reasonable based on market information for units of the same type, size, quality. Information on condition, amenities, age, and square footage also helps us with this determination. We do compare your unit to others for rent in the market area to determine value. So if you believe that we are not valuing what you're at, you can come to us with 3 comparisons and we will make an adjustment based off of that. Condition will be determined by the Housing Quality Standard Inspection and MHREIA's point system. Brief brief overview of the point system, because I'm not an inspector and I don't do this on an everyday basis. But we use a point system, so we give points for different things for the amenities and units, and this is how we calculate that rent reasonableness. This is just an example. The one on the side towards Matt is the sheet that the inspector uses. They check off or give points for different things that are within the unit. So if you have a unit that fails because it doesn't meet the points, there's different things that you can do to upgrade the unit to make it meet points so that we can subsidize it. If you have further questions on that, I will be available to answer those in depth Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30.
Yeah, I don't think I want to change careers and become a housing inspector. That looks like a lot of things
It
to
is
check.
very in-depth. So, different types of inspections that we do are the initial, which are move-in inspections. We do failed inspections, and then we do our biannual inspections. So the initial inspection is the move-in inspection. This is where the unit must pass before any contract can be signed. Again, this is a little bit redundant, I'm sorry. If the family moves in before the unit passes, the family is responsible for the rent to the owner. We stress this a lot because a lot of them will find a unit and move in before they tell us that they moved in, and then they want to know who's paying their rent. And that's when I have to tell them they have to apply for Southern Hampshire services.